Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we are jumping into part 2 of the Sam Adams Winter Classics Sampler Pack review. Now, if you did not catch part 1, the episode that released just before this one, you won't know there are 6 different beers in this sampler pack, and there's 2 of each. There is the Sam Adams Boston Lager that's in all their samplers. They have the Sam 76 Lager, the Winter Lager, Old Fezziwig, and then today's, which are the Holiday Porter and the Chocolate Bock. Now, we've done both the Sam 76 and the Boston Lager in a prior sampler pack review, so I'm not going to re-review those beers. I'm just doing the ones that I have yet to review. So it's just 2 parts instead of 3 parts, 2 in each. So we're leaving out Sam 76 and the Boston Lager, and last video was the Winter Lager and Old Fezziwig. Today we've got the Holiday Porter and the Chocolate Bock. So I paired together 2 beers that kind of complement one another. Those were Christmas spiced. These are not, and these are a little richer, darker, and the others were a little bit on the lighter side, though they're not light beers. Don't get me wrong, just a slight depth of flavor from the roastiness of the malts. So these all pair very well together, and I have had both of these before, and I am a big fan of both, but I've never given a truly in-depth review. So I'm going to do that today, and we are going to get things kicked off starting with the Holiday Porter, and this one clocks in at 5.9% ABV. Okay, so jumping right in to the first beer of today's review, we have got Sam Adams, Boston Beer Company, the parent company, Holiday Porter. This clocks in at 5.9% ABV, and they are, of course, based in Boston, Massachusetts. So first thing first, label, they change their labels, every season, every few years or so it seems. In their updated label scheme, it's just got a super clean design. There's nothing really of note, other than it's very nice. This very dark beer in a dark brown bottle with this kind of purple label. It's very appealing to the eye. Now, the name of the beer, Holiday Porter. Well, what exactly is a Holiday Porter? There's no significance in calling it holiday other than it's being brewed during the holidays. This video is going live in August of 2020, though I record well in advance so I don't fall behind. So I am recording this in December of 2019. So very shortly after this review does go live in 2020, it will be relatively relevant for the upcoming winter seasonal variety pack that they put out. They tend to have a lot of the same beers that come in, though every year or two they'll rotate different beers in there, but they all pair well together nonetheless. So without further ado, let's get this cracked, and we are properly using my porter glass today, not my Sam glass, though the Sam glass really is a great all-purpose glass, and it would do just fine with a porter. I've enjoyed many a porter out of it with not much difference. Let's get this poured right in. Okay. As you can see, I'm pouring. This is not quite as dark as some porters, but it's perfectly in range. Once it's all in the glass, it's going to look a bit darker anyway, but it's a dark brown. It's not a pitch black. It's not a stout. So it's not a stout porter. It's just a porter. And in fact, holding this up to the light, I can see light through it quite a bit more than your average porter. It's not quite as deeply dark brown. So I can see some light through here. Classic porter, it's very, very effervescent. It's got a little mix of medium and small effervescence coming up. It did form an okay head, but typically with porters, unless you're getting them off of a tap at a bar, specifically a nitro, which is rare, but I have had it and it's amazing. They're so effervescent that the head, even if it forms, it's going to be gone reasonably quickly. So looks great though. Let's give it a sniff. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That is a fantastic smelling porter, I can tell you that. You get a slight sweetness and also this underlying sense of chocolate and coffee from the roast of the malts that are in there. So a little bit sweet, little chocolatey, little coffee-like, and it smells really, really great. Some porters will put on some interesting flavors and aroma notes. Some will give off kind of figs and dates and raisins. There's a little bit of a fig and date vibe to this, but not so much raisin, which is reasonably common. And normally those, they'll have this flavor that I've described as peculiar before, almost like off, and I can't put my finger on it. But most of the porters I smell, they have this raisiny aroma, tend to have this kind of raisiny flavor as well, but it's not quite there. So pleased to report, just sweetness, coffee, and chocolate. Nice roasty malt bill. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Oh, absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. This is a bloody well done porter. A bloody well done porter. I don't recall how many review episodes it was ago, but I did a review. I've done multiple of them, but Samuel Smith's did a review of their Old Taddy Porter. This holiday porter by Sam puts me in mind of that porter, and that is among the highest praise I can give any porter. Old Taddy is arguably my favorite. I think it probably is if it's all said and done. And this, frankly, is remarkably similar and remarkably close. This is just classic porter, and it does not have any of those funky flavors. You do get a rich, deep layering from the malt bill, and it does leave this slightly earthy, smoky, coffee and chocolate-like deep roast flavor to it. It's not overboard coffee. It's not a coffee porter, but the malt roasting, the elements that come through due to the deep roast of the malt put you in mind of that. It's got aromatic hints of it, and it's got flavor hints of it, but it is very nice, and this is very much classic porter. This is just a true, honest, classic porter that's been well executed. No question about it. I'm going to jump in for body and mouthfeel and explore this flavor development a little bit more. Body on this is a solid medium. It's a strong medium. Porters are typically quite that heavy, though 5.9% ABV. This is near 6%, but it still feels a lot more robust in the mouth and on the palate than the ABV and certainly the style would let on. It feels a lot bigger than it actually is. For the mouthfeel, it's textbook porter. You can feel the effervescence in there. It's not super thick, not a ton of resistance, but just a little bit. But this porter is one that, if you agitate around the palate, gets exceptionally creamy. Exceptionally creamy, and I mean silky cream, not foamy. It's very nice. It feels right on the palate. In terms of how the flavors develop, the big punch is right up front. You get a very, very big punch from the malt bill up front. It comes through quite clearly, and it's very pronounced, and it is just these rich, deep, roasty overtones that come through immediately, and within the first 2, 3, 4 seconds, it backs off and kind of baselines, and it's got a slow, steady descent. Now, porters, they're not a beer style known for a very long finish. This is really no exception. Though I can tell you, albeit rather faint, the tail end of that roastiness, smokiness, earthiness still is lingering in the background. And I think that maybe some of the hops that they put in here might be coalescing with those characteristics and helping to extend the length on the end of the finish. Because they did make a point. In fact, I'll read straight from the label on the back of the bottle. Generous portions of traditional English ale hops and Bavarian noble hops to create an exceptional and delicious winter brew. So I definitely do think they used a generous portion. And the hops, they didn't go for high alpha, extract any kind of funk or overboard bitter, but it's enough to pair up and give a little more meat to the porter bones. And I think it's very, very well done. It's very well selected. I'm a big fan of this beer. This is just a classic porter, no gimmicks, no tricks, and it is just executed beautifully. I love the balance of it. I love the flavor of it. Really, there's not much I could critique on this, but I will take my time, sip on this, come up my scores, and when we come back, we will get to the second beer of today's review. That is the Chocolate Bock, which clocks in just lower than this at 5.8% ABV. Okay, so jumping into the second beer of today's part two, Samuel Adams Winter Classics sampler review, we have got their chocolate Bock. This one clocks in at 5.8% ABV. It is, as the name implies, a chocolate Bock. It's a Bock that's been aged on cacao nibs. And again, just a clean design, nothing really of any note other than it's got a brown colored label. So it gets you in the mood for both Bocks and chocolate since they share a similar hue. But let's go ahead and get this one cracked. All right. And poured right in the glass. Oh, yeah. It's a very nice looking beer. This is quite a bit more akin to the standard color of a Bock. If you saw part one with the winter lager, that is a winter spice Bock specifically, and it's a little lighter than your average Bock. This looks much more in line with what you will see most often. And yes, you can still see light through this beer. It gives off a kind of orangey red hue because it is a dark brown, but it's see-through, it's clear. It's got a good mix of small and medium bubbles, and it's quite active in terms of carbonation. Formed an okay head, but again, it's very active with the carbonation. It's going to collapse that relatively quickly, though it'll probably still have decent cling on the sides. Let's go ahead and give this a sniff. Okay, not a super pronounced aroma on this one at all. Not at all. You can smell a little bit of the malt bill and a little bit of the underlying chocolate, but you really got to breathe deeply. It's a very, very weak aroma. But it is what it is, so let's just jump in and see what's in store. That is a very, very, very nice beer. And it is exactly as advertised. It is a chocolate Bock. I gotta also say, for a beer that is not, lactose added, a milk stout or something like that, this is one of the most chocolate forward beers I could name. It is very, very pronounced in the chocolate realm. And it does have a little sweetness to it. Obviously, Bocks, they have a little natural sweetness to them anyway. But it adds almost the impression of milk chocolate. And it's very, very nice. Pairs very well with the Bock malt bill. The chocolate is indeed so prominent that getting the underlying classic Bock malt bill is a bit of a challenge. You can get a little bit on the front, and there's that slight sweetness which you often get with Bocks and a slight kind of richness from the malt bill, but then the chocolate just really intensifies and it dominates the rest of the flavor profile. Even though it's pairing with very clearly a Bock beer malt base, the chocolate's very, very dominant, but it's very nice. It's very, very nice. It works very well in this beer style. I'm going to jump back in for body and mouthfeel, explore this flavor development. Body on this is a solid medium. Mouthfeel feels like a traditional Bock. Not a lot of resistance. It's mostly flat. You can feel a little carbonation. And in this one, again, if you agitate around the palate to coat, let the flavors get all around, it does get silky. It doesn't get really thicker or super creamy, but it does start to take on this silky texture. It's very, very nice, very enjoyable. So on second sip, as I was thinking on the flavor development, it really is its upfront sweetness. And there's just a second or two window where you get the underlying richness from the malt bill, the slight caramel nature, a slight roastiness, before the chocolate really starts to intensify. By about the 3-4 second mark, it's really just dominated by this chocolate. But it's kind of, what they're doing with this beer. It is a chocolate Bock. They did not skimp on the chocolate, and the chocolate is really making its presence known. I enjoy it. You could make an argument that maybe it's not as balanced as you would like. Maybe let a little more of the Bock malt bill shine through, but you get it up front and then the chocolate comes through. But for my money, it beats the alternative. It beats billing itself as a chocolate Bock and the chocolate being super subtle or just nowhere to be found. It is a very front and center. It is very present in this beer, and it's not overpowering really. Even though it's the dominant flavor, it's not overpowering the beer experience. It's really working in symbiosis with the base beer and the malt bill itself. I'm a big fan of this one. It's very tasty, very chocolate forward, but very tasty. I'm gonna jump in one more time for final thoughts here. That immediate sweetness, malty sweetness, little caramel back, little roastiness from the malt, and then it's pure chocolate, and it just intensifies. And yet again, this is another beer where once it hits peak intensity, it starts with the sweetness and the malt bill, then it goes full force chocolate, then they just kind of find parity. And they're holding steady, chocolate and malt. The chocolate's maybe a little above, maybe it's 60-40 near the final seconds, and you know, it holds there, and it's very nice. In terms of length of finish on this beer, this one again is one where the finish is longer than on your average Bock, and it's really thanks to this chocolate. Though, it's not just this really nice milk chocolate flavor that you taste. There is this underlying malt character to it, and it's more cereal-like, more grainy than anything, with this milk chocolate on top. It's a very enjoyable beer. I'm a big fan of this one. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these beers, we're going to get them ranked. Starting with the Holiday Porter, this one clocked in at 5.9% ABV. Of course, Sam Adams, they are based in Boston, Massachusetts. So, starting with the aroma. The aroma on this beer was fine. It wasn't super pungent, but once you got down over it, it smelled like a classic porter. You could smell a slight sweetness, a little maltiness, a little roastiness from the malts that came through. Overall, it was just average intensity for a porter. It gets a 5 out of 10. For the taste, this was very much a very well put together classic porter recipe. No tricks, no gimmicks, just a very well executed standard porter. Had really nice undertones of nice roastiness, and I am pleased to announce again that this was one of those porters that didn't have any funky raisin-like off kind of flavors. Porters are a beer style that it's hit or miss. It seems the ones that kind of focus more on the roasty edge side of the malt tend to come out tasting better than those that don't. And I really, after all these years of drinking them, I have yet to figure out and pinpoint what it is that makes those off flavors in a porter recipe. But this was not plagued by that. Overall, it was excellent. I only docked 1 point. I give it a 9 out of 10. For the body, this was textbook porter. I mean, there's nothing more I could have wanted for, especially in this ABV range. Gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel, same story. Classic porter mouthfeel, little effervescence in there, just a slight bit of resistance. It was exactly what I anticipated. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish, the finish on this porter was exceptional. Porters aren't really known for a super long finish. Some can have longer finishes, and particularly Imperials. Just for a standard porter, I was impressed by how long the flavors stuck around. And it was really this excellent balance of this underlying roastiness and just the classic porter malt characteristics that kind of extended out the length of it. It was very nice. Just a slight hint of some hop bitters that came in the back and helped push it out further. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. For the head and retention, poured at home, this beer did a great job. It really did form quite a nice head, and porters do tend to be more effervescent than some other beer styles, but this had really excellent staying power. I thought it was above average. It gets a 7 out of 10. For the appearance, this was a very nice looking porter. It perhaps was not quite as dark as most porters, but certainly the appearance didn't have any play on the flavor characteristics. It was within range, but it wasn't top tier. I thought it was above average. It gets an 8 out of 10. For the balance on this beer was exceptional. Really exceptional. The balance and ratios of the different malts that they used, as well as the hops that they used, they just came through beautifully. And I really liked that it led with a classic porter sweetness and then this nice, rich, roasty undercurrent, including some caramel nature in there. Then it got this nice grainy quality to it, and then just these underlying hot bitters. I thought it was just perfectly balanced, and I could taste every independent element. I give it a 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible. I loved it. I did. I love porters. They are one of my absolute favorite beer styles, and a well-executed porter is just a thing of beauty, and I thought overall that this was. I docked some points in a few categories here, notably the aroma, just kind of average, but overall, I personally enjoyed what I was experiencing. I give it a 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, harkening back. It did lose some points. It did. Just average in the aroma, lost a few points in the head and retention, and really the appearance, but frankly, the beer was so strong. After all those points were docked, I only took one off as an example of the style because I thought it was just an excellent, excellent example of how to do a porter properly. It gets a 9 out of 10, which brings the total score on Sam Adams' Holiday Porter to an 88 out of 100. So this is well above average. If you're a fan of a classic porter, no frills, no gimmicks, no nonsense, just a classic well-done porter, this is well worth your time if you've never had it. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I suspect you will too. Moving on to beer number 2. This is the Chocolate Bock. 5.8% ABV on this one. And starting with the aroma on this beer was quite weak. Bocks don't have the most pronounced aroma in the world, but this was particularly weak. I mean, the really, really deep sniff right up in the glass that you had to do, you could pick up a little bit of the chocolate and just the slightest suggestion of what might be an underlying malt bill for a Bock, but it was so weak, I had to dock a lot of points here. I just gave it a 2 out of 10. Moving on to the taste. What I couldn't detect in the aroma came through in full force in the flavor profile. Frankly, it was excellent. As a Bock, it was very chocolate forward. The chocolate edition was really kind of the swan song of this beer, which I personally really enjoyed it. Bock is not a beer style you'll often see paired with chocolate, and this was very, very heavily chocolate laden. And it was a sweeter milk chocolate style, almost like chocolate syrup. It was very, very tasty, and it pairs excellently with the malt bill, but frankly, I would have liked a little more of the classic characteristic of the Bock malt bill to come through. I got a lot of chocolate and just not that much of the classic Bock, but I only docked 1 point here. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the body on this beer was textbook Bock. It was exactly what I expected. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel, same story. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish on this beer was quite nice, and it was quite a bit longer than your average Bock. Make no mistake, Bocks aren't known. It's another beer style. They're not really known for a very long finish. And this wasn't out of the realm of what you would expect. It was just so flavorful that the flavors really stuck around. The chocolate was very pungent, and it lingered on the palate. Really, it was quite a treat and quite a surprise because I didn't expect it, certainly for the beer style. Overall, though, above average, it gets an 8 out of 10. For the head and retention, it did okay. Bocks, I mean, a lot of beer styles are like this. Bocks are one of them where you never really know what you're going to get in terms of head, creation, and retention. This one did okay. I thought it was high end of average. It gets a 6 out of 10. For the appearance, this was textbook Bock. Even though it had all that chocolate addition, really, the color was exactly what I think of in my head when I think of a Bock. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance on this beer. Again, I'll come back to this. I would have liked a little more of the classic Bock malt bill to come through. I did appreciate the chocolate. It was very delicious. Make no mistake, it was very delicious. I just would have liked to get a little more of the classic standard Bock malt bill flavor to come through, but I only docked 1 point. It gets a 9 out of 10. Filling in the intangible. I docked some points in a few categories. Overall, I really enjoyed the beer. Subjectively, I really enjoyed the beer. And subjectively, really, I could see past the lack of intensity of the aroma, and frankly, not that big of a deal. And it was a bit of a surprise when you get into it. I mean, granted, I have had this beer before, but it only comes out once a year, so it's always a nice treat to revisit. But frankly, for me, even though I would have liked a little tweak on the balance, the beer is just so stinking good. I only dock 1 point here as well subjectively. It gets a 9 out of 10. Finally is an example of this style. This is where the point loss in the various categories really comes into play. This beer is a very excellently brewed Bock. The chocolate that they put in there pairs excellently with the standard Bock malt bill. That said, it did lose some very big points in aroma, head and retention, just high end of average, and those were enough to just take some points off. But overall, it was certainly above average. I give it an 8 out of 10, which brings the total score on Sam Adams Chocolate Bock to an 81 out of 100. So yet again, another well above average beer. If you're a fan of both porters and Bocks, and you've never had either of these, I do sincerely and highly recommend both of these. They are excellent. Sam Adams is one of the big players in the craft game, one of the OGs, and they've had a long time to perfect it, and these are two great examples of just how well their fine-tuned formula for brewing really great beer is. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, you just click the notification bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.